I'm Henry Halladay. I would like to talk about Internet of Things and transportation. In this discussion, I will look at the macro view, that is overview, rather than the micro view, which are the details of the sensor circuits and communications. I want to cover the complexity as it applies to personal transportation, which is applied to roadways and includes cars, SUVs, motorcycles, and two-wheel vehicles, and mass transportation, which includes trucking, rail, air, and sea. The scope of automation in transportation is complex and covers all areas as the technologies evolve: convenience, safety, control, operation, and communication. What do we need to keep in mind? Well, it's people and goods, single, individual, or groups, jurisdictions, local, national, global, and safety and or convenience, assistance, or distraction. What are some of the issues as I see them? Single vehicle versus mass transportation. Who's in charge? Manufacturers or government? National Highway Safety Administration and or Federal Aviation Authority. In recent accidents involving vehicle training have raised issues and the application to personal vehicles. How are vehicle technology implementation issues affected by regulations? For example, driver assist and or driverless implementations. Where are we today? What and where are verification/simulation issues addressed? And who monitors and approves lane maintenance, collision avoidance? Sensor status, is that at the dealers, the manufacturers, or none of the above? Although there are other agencies that claim to have a role in this, at least testing. What about trucks, ships, planes, and other vehicles that have multiple regulators across multiple cities, states, and countries? There's a question of how we coordinate these issues. Let's take a look at some of the personal transportation topics. On the ground, let's consider cars. Almost everyone has one or more. The safety of the vehicles versus privacy. What is distracted driving versus informed driving, which utilizes displays, tones, actions, and even now voice? How can it be applied across all types of vehicles? Sensor advantages. The coverage sensitivity, that is range, field of view, detection, which includes day and night, clear and obscure, even now around the corner as the new 5G takes place. Integration of multiple sensors is increasingly involved. Combines optical, radar, acoustic, infrared, and the processes associated with each sensor and the integration into a centralized process, or even mass computers as we now communicate back to a central focal point. The accuracy is always a question in my mind. What about lane maintenance, collision avoidance, people avoidance, etc., where we are driving along a lane and the lane next to us may be occupied by a truck which occupies essentially all of that lane? How close do we want to be to that lane marker that is being tracked? The use of infrared, millimeter radar for motion obscure view, such as rain, snow, or fog, are now starting to appear and need to be integrated with the onboard process or centralized process. What about wireless vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which enables cars to see around the corner because they're talking with other ones through the expanded 5G wireless, which is about to come online and expects significant fielding in the next year or two. Signal processing algorithms to combine sensors, or sensor fusions it's called, is going to increase the codependence on processors and the codependence on other vehicles talking. What about those that aren't part of that process yet? The impacts of artificial intelligence, or AI, evolution is a must for self-driving. But we are still learning how learning takes place in processors and are yet to establish what do we do to accommodate unknowns. Is adaptive sufficient? What about our learning? How does the community address the learning process when we're still trying to understand how it works? The other issue that's come up is the deep learning for smarter cars. What is deep learning? We're still trying to understand that, but it involves trying to understand human intelligence and how do we adapt to the circumstances around us. The advantage of using centralized process for doing some of these predictive behavior across multiple vehicles means we have more communication, and then there's the time factor. How does it affect if you need an instantaneous decision? And these are going to be impacted by the new 5G wireless, which offers faster response in the order of milliseconds versus seconds to minutes before. Now the pedestrian avoidance to see around corners using multiple links will involve detection of that is independent of sex, race, and stature, and thus needs to have further thought in terms of how do we do that, how do we test it, is a mass testing program required. The higher data rates means more data exchange and processing in a short period of time, and it may be only possible in 5G and the new supercomputers which are coming online. Car-to-car communication becomes a must if we're going to try to do more predictive around-the-corner seeing that's taking place. This is exciting and may offer some significant safety advantages, but we have yet to prove it, and also how do we test it to be sure that it's a robust system. Trucks, SUV, and buses are destined to incorporate automobile advances in terms of the sensors, displays, warnings, and automatic actions that will also increase then the total communication process for detection, processing, and alerting for those vehicles. With respect to bicycles, and they may be manually or they may be electric, we're seeing that from a mechanical standpoint, lighter weight materials and safety features from cars are now beginning to be incorporated into bicycles, especially those of electric, or even if they aren't electric per se, portable batteries that will work are helping the safety of bicycles. From an electric standpoint, we now are seeing better mileage from battery-powered issues, and also allows for more safety features. Self-driving, we haven't begun to see anything with respect to bicycles because they also should be able to take advantage of auto braking and steering, balance, and other factors that are incorporating into other vehicles. Sound alerts, video cues, and sensor fusion are all going to be part of this process. And I won't talk very much about it this time, but personal air vehicles are still on the horizon. They're not here yet, but we are already seeing both piloted and pilotless vehicles, or UAVs, are becoming an increasing issue with respect to satisfying communication and delivery throughout the communities. This brings us then to delivery systems, particularly with respect to ground. Personal deliveries now are being handled both by individual driving cars. We have also people movers that are being considered, and taxis that are all part of this ground communication conglomeration. Small, medium, and large delivery vehicles are being considered to meet market demands, where we have automated small and large trucks, possibly fully automated rail, and self-flying commercial aircraft is on the horizon. and rural remote deliveries, medical and emergencies using UAVs and other personal-sized vehicles are on the horizon. And certainly it's going to make it interesting from a technology perspective. Before we move on, I would like to tell you of my own experience of technology in automobiles. More than 10 years ago, I had a GMC that had a heads-up display. That display I thought was wonderful, but it was too early in its time and was discontinued by GM, and no one has picked it up until the last few years. Since then, I have invested in a vehicle that not only had a head-up display, but had a personal viewing area that started out at a few inches and then expanded to 12. That display and the driving navigation system enabled me to go hands-free with my telephone, had a view of not only the road and the path to be traveled, but had a 360-degree display when going less than 5 miles an hour that I could see when I was entering a parking spot, where I was with respect to the car in front of me, and also had sensors on all sides for detection of vehicles and personnel to make sure I didn't run into them. These two technologies, the heads-up display and the 360-degree view, has given me a chance to see how this works. I will say that the navigation, which also had automatic steering for lane control and for lane centering, was a new experience for me. And I did have trouble with the lane centering, or at least the manufacturer did, in that I thought it was not sensitive enough at 55 to 60 miles an hour to be able to maintain the center without wandering and potentially violating the lanes or wandering from side to side, where I was concerned about the police thinking I was drunk. So I was a little disappointed with that, and I communicated this both to the dealer to see if they could adjust it. They can't. The manufacturer to see if it was an issue that they thought they could resolve, and have not heard from either place that this was a possibility. So it does say that there's some issues with respect to the sensors and also the actions that are taken by the car that certainly are going to impact the future of automated driving versus people who are supposed to be in control. And I see that even car manufacturers who are even more advanced in terms of automated driving still have issues with respect to predicting what pedestrians are going to do, or leaving the car out of control of the driver and no action is taken before an accident occurs. So we're going to see several of these things. I guess the good news is that for a single car, the number of fatalities are limited as opposed to what happens in the aircraft industry when a plane goes down. So that's enough of my own personal comments for now. If we now move on to mass transportation, we have on the ground rail systems which have already shown an impact of technology when not implemented in terms of speed, lack of coordination, cost, regulation and enforcement, government bureaucracy, competition, and dollars. Obviously, with respect to the rail system or even air seems to be ahead, but rail's going to come up, especially if we have increased speeds of rail systems. The automation of rail inspections is going to be important. Satellite monitoring of land problems such as landslides, earthquake, and debris is going to be important. And the issues of new to high-speed rail are going to definitely increase the need for better visibility of our rail systems and incorporating some of the safety features that we're seeing in the automotive areas. With respect to buses, we already have seen major accidents caused by safety issues and the need to incorporate more safety features such as the 360-degree view starting to show up in local buses, but are also needed for over-the-road technology. And the maintenance issues are going to be important for automatic monitoring of the sensor and other collision avoidance detection and processing. Trucks, we need to incorporate and are seeing more incorporation of technology that's shown up in the automotive field, but is particularly important those are tandem trucks, which can be catastrophic if we have issues with respect to them. The minimum distance maintenance is going to be important. Predictive maintenance is an issue that I see is going to be an increasing incorporation into large vehicles, and the maintaining of hazardous load information. With respect to air, we've already seen impacts of technology when not implemented: speed, lack of user involvement, cost versus safety, regulation enforcement, how much is done by the supplier versus the government bureaucracy, which is always a question, and whether the government has adequate funding to do maintenance of safety. And obviously from a manufacturer standpoint, it's always going to be profit above safety as an issue that shouldn't exist. Complicating the air is global versus regional controls. Most of it seems to be dependent on manufacturer self-monitoring versus true government control. But of course, this happens in a free society where we don't necessarily want a lot of government monitoring, but in many cases we need someone to oversee, and the question is which government is doing that. On the water, we see luxury ships, which are now essentially floating systems with thousands of individuals taking advantage of the new technologies, and where it costs more than $1 billion to build these ships, and they at that kind of cost they can afford to incorporate state-of-the-art technology, but there's no overseeing function that says who's keeping track of what these are doing, whether they're being implemented in a way that's consistent. And with global communications using satellites are being implemented to provide tracking of these ships, where are the global requirements for technology enhancements for safety, such as self-diagnostic engines, backup of key systems, collision avoidance, docking, and evacuation? We always seem to assume everything's okay, but who's overseeing this? That's a question which still I don't see good answers to. Well, this is going to be all for now. I hope you are not too confused by the subject of interaction between technology, sociology, and humanity, and the issues of implementing costs to our life experiences, including safety, privacy, convenience, and evolution.